Welcome back, everyone. Well, in this final video, we're just going to continue with the rose. And I'm working on the first pass now of all the greenery in the stems and in the leaves. You're going to see a lot of yellow-green on this first pass. And as I get into the deeper bluer shadows, I'll be adding Prussian blue to deepen that green. So here's how I'm doing my palette and working my palette for the leaves and the stem. Down here is the azo green, which you can see is a very, very yellow green here against the white. As I move more towards shadow, I mix in this Prussian blue and get a more true green, as you can see there. And in the deepest, darkest shadows, I bring in a little of this ultramarine here. And that's pretty much it on the leaves. On the stem, where there's some red brown, I'll pull in from over here, I'll pull in some red iron oxide. The blending technique is the same. You see me wiping my brush there, just applying down paint, wiping, and then picking up and blending out the edge. Sometimes rinsing my brush to blend out the edge. My light source is coming from the right, so I'm shadowing the left side. And in a lot of cases where the water and the paint are already down, you can do it a little bit wet and wet. But it's just a long process now of putting down the paint and blending it out. Really, though, this is the most fun part, I think, of the process. It's like coloring, really. It's not that difficult. You do have to use some thought as to which direction the light's coming from. And I'm going to paint around the stems here. I didn't mask them off, but the leaf veins and the stems, I'm going to paint around. Because I'm not really doing large, wet, kind of sloppy washes, it should be easy enough to paint around the veins. And so that's what you see me doing here on this leaf, and that's what I pretty much do on all of them. But just establishing a good undertone. Once a little bit of Prussian blue is added and it deepens the green, I'll go back and shadow. I'm kind of making up where these shadows are going to be on the leaf. The main thing, the main goal with painting these leaves is that you don't want them to look flat. You don't want them to look like flat pieces of cut out paper. You know, you want them to curl and bow, and not only that, but they kind of create waves. So I'm creating these up and down humps. So that's one reason I don't put all the color down in one big flat wash. I'll put it down in areas. Sometimes I'll fill in a whole leaf, but here where I'm trying to paint this bigger leaf and I'm painting around the veins, you know, it works fine because I want the color to vary. You see how much lighter I have towards the tip there, a yellow green, and I'm keeping the yellower green for those highlights and keeping the bluer greens for the shadow. But in this first pass, I'm just starting to establish some of those values. And just starting to define the veins. And as I mentioned earlier on the petal, the highlights on the petals, if in doubt, leave it white. Now I'll go back undoubtedly and darken the values of some of those veins, but initially, I'm going to leave them white. The paint's giving me an opportunity here, since it's all still pretty damp. It's giving me an opportunity here to dab in some shadows wet and wet. Wet and wet helps you, to blend. It blends for you. Down there it's dry though. I'm having to blend it right there by hand. So for the most part, as I mentioned earlier, these washes are put down dry and then blended out. And a big kind of a skip here, and you can see I've worked several of those leaves through the first pass. Now this leaf, I am pretty much painting in the whole leaf. Just decided to try that and use the bigger brush and do some of it wet and wet. I'm keeping the shadow tones away from the veins though. Even though I painted over them, they're still very light, so they'll show once I paint around them. Best way to learn this is just to try it. Watch what I'm doing and go back and try it. You see how I've kind of fanned and squished my brush out there to blend it out? I do that with the paper towel. I kind of squish the tip of the brush so that it makes kind of a little flat edge, and I can blend sometimes with that. Just evening out the tones here. It's dry, and now I'm going back over with a wet on dry wash. Put it down, wipe my brush, blend. Simplest, most basic type of blend. And almost every bit of this painting is done that way. Stems, same way, just filling in basically with a little darker and heavier on the shadow side. This process is just an awful lot of fun. You get into a real kind of a zen state, when you're in the rhythm and doing all this coloring. Just really neat. But the planning really helps you. I mean, the good drawing, the careful observation, take away as many of the decisions as you can before you start by observing your reference, thinking through what you're doing. So when you get into this portion of it, this process, it's coming easier. Adding more shadow to that stem. There you can see the whole thing. That's the completed rose in first pass. And now we're going to go back and add some pop. And for some people, this would be fine, this more pastel version. And I'm not unhappy with that. It's actually a little bit darker here than it probably is in real life, but I'm going to deepen some tones and some color and just give it a little bit more pop in places. And you'll see how I do that. But it's all up to you. It's all up to your tastes. When I start adding some of the shadow and the greens, you're going to really see it pop off the page. So back up to a second pass here on the rose and the rose petals. Same blend, same blending technique, just deepening the tones in the deepest shadows. One thing to be careful about when you're putting in lowlights or shadow areas is don't make them all the same darkness. Go through and identify where your deepest ones are, and there's only a few. They're going to vary. You don't want every low light to be this dark little corner. The side I'm painting on there now is lighter than the opposite side. The light's coming from that direction. And it has more yellow. So I'm taking those things into account in my color mix. And here where that petal actually goes behind the petal next to it, I've been deepening that a little bit. It's a little dark there right now, but this all dries lighter. We're going to darken that petal. This is the underside or the back side, shadow side, the darkest side. It's a pretty cool shadow, so I added in just a tiny bit of Payne's Gray, just a tiny bit. And I'll probably need to pick up some of this. It's getting a little dark. Adding a glaze of yellow there, and then more of a Payne's Gray touch to the paint down in that little shadow area there. Blending with a squeezed out dryer brush. This paper is great for this. This hot press, 140 pound, Strathmore Imperial. Just a really nice paper for this kind of technique. Pulling the value down underneath that. From here on out, we're going to speed it up. I think hopefully I've shown you enough in real time that you have the idea of how the techniques work and how the blending works. And I haven't speeded it up terribly. You can still see what I'm doing, but the techniques are the same. It just gets very repetitive, as I've already said. But just pay attention, use a lot of observation, and notice where these petals turn and fold down into the blossom and then turn and fold over the edge. That's all I'm doing. Adjusting, adjusting, adjusting. This is starting to get to where it's got the pop that I want it to have. It's a little bit more intense than the real photo, but that's all right. And I like kind of the starkness of it where you can see the structure of the bloom. That's very botanical, classically botanical in nature. And so here I've slowed it back down. We're going to start the second pass on the greenery. And just to give you an idea, now I'm introducing more Prussian blue into the mix. And in the very deepest, darkest low lights, I will even add a touch of ultramarine blue. But watch here now on all of this greenery how it all starts to come to life. I especially like the low lights and the shadows that come right underneath that bloom on this greenery. It just makes the whole thing pop off the page. Just fun, fun, fun. You start to see this thing come to life. One of the reasons I do this in passes, and I've done some paintings where it's taken 3 or 4 or a dozen passes, is because, I'm wanting to see gradually. I'm wanting to make decisions. I'm not wanting to do it all on the fly because I'm wanting to model the light in precise ways. So don't be afraid, as long as you're using the same colors, don't be afraid to do this in multiple passes where the bottom passes have dried. You can see how that nice little low light there on the stem just really bringing the blossom to life. And the leaves likewise. It really gets fun here when you start adding these dark tinges. I noticed there are dark tinges around the edges of the leaf, so I accentuated that a little. I'm knocking back some of the starkness of the veins, but I'm leaving just a suggestion of where the veins are in the leaves. And here in the lower part of the stem, there was actually some brownish color, and I'm using red iron oxide there to add that brownish color. I'm sort of making up the shadowing on these leaves. I think I might have mentioned that. And that's okay, the light source coming from the right, but in essence, that edge, for instance, on the leaf is curling up, so it won't catch the light. It'll actually shadow the light. But the tip is bending down, pointing towards the light. As long as you get some nice variegation, I think, and undulation in the shadows, I think your leaves will look pretty nice. Study, study, study the leaf with your eye. If you don't feel like the reference is giving you enough information, go buy a rose. You could even buy a fake one if you want, so it never changes. They have some pretty good fake roses, silk roses these days. Set it in a vase and study it under the light. And copy the effects, or incorporate, I should say, the effects that you see. Learn how to interpret that on a leaf in your own way, which is all I'm doing here. Knocking back the start value of the veins a little bit, and just here you can see where I didn't leave those veins white, but they were light enough, so when I paint around them I can get a nice suggestion that they're still there. Trying to unify the color in the whole thing now and just blend it together. I like the dark tinges on the edge. I think that looks really good, and then I blend that in. And we come down in here and finish out our stem, and we're getting really close here to being done. I actually did what I would say are 3, maybe 4 passes on some of the leaves rather than do complete pass and come back and do another complete pass. It's just a matter of doing all the passes on the leaf I'm working on all at the same time. Adding the darkest tones on the stems, and the whole thing's starting to pop now. But I don't think I want to do much more than that. I managed to, I think, get the depth of tone and modeling that I wanted in just a couple passes. I tried to add a little more interest. I tried to add a little more variegation. And I want to really get the idea that those leaves kind of fold in or roll out and undulate. And I felt like in the reference it was just a little too flat. And I'm pleased with that. I think it works out well. You'll see in the final results, you just get a lot livelier look. Same thing in the rose itself. I added a little more starkness to the highlights, and I got a little more deepness in the pink and the yellows. So keep that in mind as you're painting. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you took away some great techniques and ideas and things you can practice and learn. Go back, look at some of the things that I've done. This particular workshop with the rose I know is very repetitive. It's essentially the same technique used on every inch of it, but it's judging what you see, how to apply the paint, where to apply it, how to blend it out, and using that technique over and over again, you really will learn to master it. And it's just a lot of fun. It's very satisfying. Thanks everybody so much for joining me in this workshop. I had a blast, and thanks to Strathmore for giving me the opportunity. I hope you'll all come over and visit me at my YouTube channel, The Mind of Watercolor. And until then, happy painting.